Hi, my name is Amy, and today I'm presenting a Ben talk on my research in the field of decision processes on the perception. But first, a little background. Imagine that you are a little upset about a faulty product purchase and wish to get a refund. The company does not do refunds outside a specific window of time that you have now exceeded slightly. While the inconvenience was minimal, you consider playing up your display of anger towards the customer service representative because you think it will increase your chances of getting what you want. How do people perceive this instance of emotional regulation with anger for personal benefit? How does this perception perhaps change when this emotional display crosses the line into incivility? And how does this impact our perceptions of trust of this person? While the scholars in this field have researched the idea of emotion regulation since the late 1990s, there's little research looking at the perceptions of emotion regulation in various contexts, and as well as there's no research regarding the interplay of this with perceptions of incivility. So this is what my research has aimed to look at. In terms of background research, what's important to know is that the scholar Gross kind of established the field of emotion regulation, and in 1998 published a paper kind of defining the topic, saying that this is studying how individuals influence which emotions they have, when they have them, and how they experience them and express them. And so these processes can vary in structure, from automatic to controlled, from conscious to unconscious, but usually they're discussed in the context of managing one's own emotions and managing others' emotions. And this field is closely related to the field of emotional labor, which was established by Hochschild. And this is the field that studies how emotion regulation strategies are used by employees to conform more closely to the prevailing organizational norms and expectations concerning emotional expressions, known as display rules. So this is when an employee kind of upregulates or downregulates their emotions to fit in more with what's appropriate at work. And this can be done one of two ways. One is deep acting, where they kind of re-evaluate the situation and kind of change how they're feeling. And the second is surface acting, where they just kind of aim to cover up their emotion superficially. And in terms of the research on incivility, it's more focused on acting without regard for others, especially in the workplace. A lot of the literature recently has focused on kind of workplace misconduct and aggression. But just to go back a little bit, the word civility in this context has gone beyond the definition of courtesy and politeness and has evolved to incorporate a more moral sense, an implication that involves preserving the social norms of dignity and respect and regard for others' feelings. So this kind of has an interesting implication for the workplace, where many researchers have found that this is a very low intensity and ambiguous form of workplace aggression that arises more often because it's kind of lower on the aggression scale than other uncivil acts. And so my research is kind of looking at the interplay of these fields of study. More specifically, I just wanted to go interesting in the field that I thought was interesting. We see that authenticity really affects the outcome when someone engages in surface acting. Their true emotions can sometimes leak out through channels that are less controllable and often beyond what one's awareness encompasses. And so that can be their facial expression, that can be kind of minute body language. Basically, sometimes emotion regulation can backfire because authenticity is really important to the other person who's interacting with you. Across a number of studies, participants who have used surface acting felt less authentic themselves, which makes sense, but also are perceived as having lower quality relationships. So this kind of affects the quality of social interactions. Additionally, we see that emotional intensity can damage trust when it's perceived as inappropriate or inauthentic, as we've discussed. So kind of appropriateness and authenticity are big mediators in that sense. We also found that people are willing to overstate their anger when they believe it to be financially beneficial. So this is definitely something that we've seen in kind of a negotiation context. People are willing to pretend that they're really angry in order to get what they want, even though that's an inauthentic display. And then in terms of incivility, most of it has focused, as I said, on incivility in the workplace, and studies have shown that there are negative psychological impacts as a form of interpersonal mistreatment. So that's kind of where the focus has been. And so my research question has been, how do people's perceptions of trust change with authentic and inauthentic displays of incivility and anger? I looked at this particularly in the context of a customer service interaction because I felt that that was something fairly common and interesting to me. And so moving on to the design, it was a 2x2 design where kind of in this little chart you see on the left side, civil and uncivil. That's the chat transcript that you see in the upper right-hand corner. I have kind of a picture showing the design. The chat, the actual content of the chat between the participant and the actor and the customer service representative. And then on the other side of the 2x2, we see angry and neutral, and that's the facial expression of the actor who is supposed to be interacting with the customer service representative, and their face is shown in the upper right-hand corner. So either you are angry, but you're holding your anger in, so you're down-regulating the anger and you're being civil, or you're angry and you're uncivil, which is authentic, or you are neutral and civil, which is authentic, or you are neutral and you upregulate your anger to be uncivil, maybe to try and get what you want. And so I had two hypotheses going into this experiment. One was that civility paired with anger boosts trust compared to civility paired with neutral emotions. So this more authentic expression of anger should lead to higher trust because it's authentic. And the second was that civility paired with anger boosts trust compared to incivility paired with anger. And that's kind of interesting because here I'm saying that an inauthentic expression is higher trust than an authentic expression because we kind of have this perception of self-restraint and discipline, and there are kind of, let's say, discounts associated with being uncivil, and kind of anger is generally frowned upon. So here we don't have to read through it word for word, but I just wanted to show you kind of what the transcripts look like. The civil and uncivil transcripts were identical except for certain phrasing used by the customer, which is in bold. Here you can see that some of it is in all caps, some of it is a personal attack, like don't be an idiot, just kind of showing you what we were working with. And now for the GVs. So I measured a couple of things. The main thing I was interested in was trust, but also a lot of the literature measures kind of perception in terms of what's called ABI, so ability, integrity, and benevolence. So those were also measured, but trust was generally trust, but also trust in the sense of affective trust and cognitive trust. So the first meaning kind of an emotional trust, you would talk, for example, I would talk to this person about difficulties I'm having, versus cognitive trust, like you trust that they are very competent and they know what they're doing, so you would take this person's advice about school or work. As well, we measured appropriateness, honesty, and morality. Also something that is kind of interesting in this context. So before we did the study, I conducted several pilots just to make sure that the manipulations were working and that the survey was correctly designed. So this is pre-study. First, before we even conducted any pilots on MTurk, I sent in the facial expression videos from the actor to someone at Wharton who had written a computer program to read emotions from a computer program. So on the left, it's called Face Reader. On the left, you can see that the neutral one is working. The big gray area is just kind of neutral or none, and then the little slice of white is kind of other, which is just kind of noise. So we see that the neutral one is working because it's mostly neutral. And then on the right, it's perhaps more interesting. It's still largely neutral, which is to be expected, just because that's kind of how human expressions work. But we do see hints of anger and sadness, which are just generally negative valence emotions. I talked to the guy running this program, and he said it's pretty common to have the computer struggle to differentiate between negative valence emotions like sadness and anger, so it's natural to see a mix of them. But here again, it's just that the program is picking up on the fact that this person's expression is upset or angry versus just completely neutral. And so the first pilot that we ran on MTurk was with 30 people. We basically just wanted to see that the video manipulation was working. We had them rate just from strongly disagree to strongly agree on all of Ekman's emotions. We saw correctly that the neutral one was mostly neutral. People didn't seem to think that they were extremely scared, angry, disgusted, or any of those. For the angry one, people said angry, disgusted, maybe a little surprised. These are kind of the emotions we were expecting, so that was kind of some positive feedback for the go-ahead. And then the pilot for the full study we ran with 60 people just to see that the manipulation was working again. We also wanted to see that the civility and incivility was coming through. So we asked, oh, this person seems incivil, or this person is acting selfish. Strongly disagree to strongly agree. And then we saw that on the left, for the civil conditions, it was low for incivility, which is good. And then on the right, for selfish, we saw that the incivil transcripts came across as more selfish, which also was kind of a good signal, as to be expected. So then going on to the more exciting part is kind of, here's what we found. So it did kind of confirm our hypotheses. We saw that civility promotes trust, kind of generally. And in addition, perhaps more interestingly, civility with anger promotes trust compared with an authentic expression of incivility with anger. So we see this with trust on the upper right, just kind of as a general category. And we also see this with affective and cognitive trust. So we see the middle two bars for all three of these graphs being higher, which means civility in general promotes trust. And then additionally, for the second point, we see that in the top right chart, we see that civility with anger is actually more trustworthy in terms of perception than neutral incivility. So it means that kind of people are ascribing this premium of trust to someone who is able to act calmly and civilly even when they are actually angry or when they seem angry. So that's kind of interesting that seems more trustworthy than someone who's authentically just calm and civil. So in terms of the implications of this, still lots to think about, but mainly we see that there are applications to civility promoting trust in the workplace and personal life. So this is something, again, that is important to keep in mind, maybe in terms of structuring company culture. Workplace incivility, though considered the least aggressive of aggression acts, can be detrimental to team trust. That's important to keep in mind. We also find that the downregulation of anger and restraint is associated with civility and anger, and this can promote trust even more so than authentic displays. So though authenticity is generally perceived positively in most of the research that we've seen so far, this doesn't seem to apply in cases of incivility, and it may be more context-based than we previously thought, so kind of a direction for further research perhaps. And that is all. Thank you for listening.